setting the facts straight or telling a few nice stories, that we are really actually up against something much bigger that is driving these policies. Who is prepared to suggest a way forward? Because the way that we have been responding is clearly not working. So how might we actually even start drawing threads between some of the things that we've already touched on, the closure of indigenous communities, the global refugee crisis, and our, in Australia, our particular policies on refugees, and the racialisation of Muslim groups, the experiences in Western Sydney that we've already touched on. How might we start drawing threads and thinking of ways to respond differently to all of this big question?
Yeah, it is a huge question. I think I know how to maybe not go forward, which is basically to not take shortcuts. You know, like when we combat racism in particular, you know, the knee-jerk thing is, you know, people are saying that, you know, we don't belong here, but yes we do, because we contribute and we're good workers, and we have, you know, we go to uni and we end up, you know, contributing in whatever way. And I mean, if you just look at Muslim communities in South London, like it's been long enough now, it's been almost 15 years, that we can actually see whether or not that approach has worked, and it just hasn't. You know, like in the first few years, I can understand why people did it, but yeah, and people were not willing to kind of consider that maybe that was just a total failure of a tactic. But I think 15 years later, we can see that it just really hasn't put a dent.
So we've just doubled down with the same.
Well, we're just on this treadmill where, you know, people keep saying Muslims are dangerous and Muslims are whatever, and we keep saying, well, no, we're not, and Islam's a religion of peace, and you've got facts wrong, and you know, it's so much deeper than that. And I think we just have to commit ourselves to the idea that we just have to make more complex arguments, and it will take much longer to make those arguments. And you know, it's not something that we can just fix overnight with the right PR campaign, whether it's, you know, Muslims or refugees or whatever the case is.
Yeah, just quickly, just to add to Anna's point, is right, like you can't just expect to have a PR campaign and everything will kind of fall into place. What I would, if I ever had like any sway, if I was like this, if I had a genie, and I would change the Australian curriculum, start with that. I would kind of have more representation in literature and media, start with that. Start changing with, initiate change with our generation that's coming up, because I feel like, I don't know if I'm being jaded or a bit cynical, but it's sort of a bit too late right now for whoever is in power to actually listen, or like they're on their high horse right now with, you know, swimming in their little gold coins like Scrooge McDuck to actually, you know, give two shits about. So, and I just think that there is, when it comes down to it right now, the democratic process isn't really that democratic in fact. So definitely more representation. I'm going to be talking from a perspective of someone from community. Is a very vital point, because having a privileged position, like for example, right now I'm in a very privileged position to talk to you. I'm taking up someone's position to say my opinion to someone who could be way more qualified and someone who has a way more interesting story than I am. But I need to just know that. I need to acknowledge that and just know that in our education system, whether it be even in our media, you know, we have movies that say Exodus of God and it's full of white people talking about Egypt, you know, and we're like, okay, why is that? Like, and that's when capitalism comes in. It's like, actually, no one's going to buy it. How do you know that? And so, just little things like that we think are just minuscule, they're not. You know, that's how you desensitize people. That's how you make them look in the mirror and wanting to buy bleach and whitening cream and hey, stop being a hairy Arab, and then being vilified, and then having to answer every single question. Like for example, as a child, I grew up with people asking me, hey, tell me about Islam. If I should be taught that is a very sacred and a very divine interaction between myself and my faith, and it's a very personal question for someone to come up to you and be like, hey, tell me about your religion. I'm a young kid. Why would you put me on a panel or tell me to write something and then publicize it and make profit out of it, whether it be monetary or whether it be to alleviate your cause? That's a very dangerous thing to do to young people. You know, that's why education is super, super important, and representation delivered by that education is super important. And I think that's what it just needs to be. Yes, maybe we're young, and this whole idea of diversity is extremely counterintuitive, because then we'll have stuff like Black Lives Matter. I'm talking globally now, like Black Lives Matter, and people are like, no, all lives matter. But no, you actually just retracted this whole thing, and you put yourself in it, and then now this issue has been forgotten, and then for on the umbrella of diversity. And so, yes, it is counterintuitive and counterproductive at times, but you know, it just, for me, I believe from a community perspective, we just need more representation, whether it be media, literature, and even in schools. And so, starting with our young ones, hopefully there's a chance. And that would be my solution for you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. And I also think that the likes of Pauline Hanson shouldn't be given a voice. Her comments were deplorable yesterday I don't know if anyone watched Sunrise, but, you know, she started off by saying, you know, these Muslims and then reverse racism and they're taking our jobs. And I mean, she's just spewing the same rhetoric that she did 20 years ago, but it was about the Asian community. And I don't know, I just think that going back to legislation, I think that there should be some legislative implementations in order to protect the minority groups in the country, whether they be Muslim or otherwise, from that kind of defamation, that's the word.
Okay.